This is the Air 3S, and it's been out for a few weeks, and so far it's one of my favorite drones I've ever flown. To get the most out of it though, you're going to need to change a few settings. Here are the best cinematic settings for the Air 3S. So out of the box, one of the first things I noticed was that the Air 3S has this kind of digital sharpness look to it. It's not necessarily bad for social media, but if you're trying to get a more cinematic look, you want that footage to be a lot softer. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to go into the settings and turn that sharpness down. So to change those settings, you're going to hit the three little buttons at the top right of your controller, scroll over to where it says camera, and then go all the way down to where it says style. From there, I've been applying sharpness at -2. Now by doing this, we're not removing any of the detail the drone itself is capturing, we're just reducing the amount of in-camera processing. So all that detail is still there, and if you want later in post, you can actually reapply that sharpening. We just don't want any of it baked into the footage itself. Now while we're in the same menu, we're gonna go ahead and reduce noise reduction to -1 or -2. You can kind of play around with that and see what you like best. I've been finding that -1 is a good balance. You're not going to notice a huge effect of changing noise reduction. Ideally, what you're going to do is you're going to see a little bit more detail in the shadows with the trade-off of some extra noise. But again, in post, we can change that and add some noise reduction if needed. So to change the shutter speed, we're going to have to change the camera out of auto and put it in manual or pro mode. So go ahead and do that, and then we're going to tap on the bottom right settings, and you'll see ISO and shutter speed. We're going to make sure that we take ISO and shutter speed out of auto. For ISO, generally you want that to be as low as possible. Sometimes you will have to bump that up in low light conditions, but general rule of thumb with ISO is you want that to be as low as possible. For shutter speed, we want to be following the 180-degree shutter rule. Now, to keep that simple, basically all that means is take whatever frame rate you're recording at. In my case, it's 30 FPS. Double that, so 60, and we want to be recording our shutter speed at 1/60. And again, if you were recording at 60 frames per second, you'd double that, and you'd want to be recording your shutter at 1/120. Sometimes it doesn't always line up. For instance, if you're recording at 24 frames per second, there's no option to record at 1/48, so just choose the closest thing, which is 1/50. Now that you have your shutter speed set, what you're probably going to immediately notice if you're outside is that your image is going to be way overexposed. It's going to be completely blown out. And one of the reasons for that is shutter speed is part of controlling the amount of light that comes into the camera. So without an adjustable aperture on the Air 3S, we're actually going to have to use a different method of controlling how that light is coming in, and that's going to be ND filters. You can kind of think of ND filters as sunglasses for your camera. They just stop light from coming in so that you can maintain the proper exposure settings on the camera itself. Here's an example with and without an ND filter. Without the ND filter, we have to crank the shutter speed to reduce that light that's coming in. And the result of that is that we get this weird jittery motion. It's very, very stiff, and it's not what we're looking for, especially for cinematic footage. So with the ND filter on, you'll notice it's a lot smoother. There's some more natural motion blur because we can lock that shutter speed to exactly where we want it. Now moving over to the other side of the menu, we have white balance. So white balance is a really weird thing with the Air 3S. I've noticed that it's a little bit warmer than I would usually be expecting. Typically, whenever you're flying in daytime conditions, you want to be recording at around 5,500 Kelvin. With the Air 3S, I've noticed it's about 400 to 500 Kelvin warmer than I would expect. So I've just been flying at around 5,000 Kelvin for daytime and adjusting based off of that. We also want to make sure that our white balance isn't set to auto. We want it set to manual. If you're recording in auto, it's fine most of the time, but every now and then you're going to get some shifts in your color temperature mid-recording, and that's not what we want. That's not really a DJI issue. That's a thing with every camera. You just want to make sure that you have that set to manual so you're not getting weird adjustments mid-footage. All right, in that same menu, we're going to go down to where it says color. You have the options for normal, HLG, and D-Log-M. Normal and HLG are going to be DJI doing the processing inside the camera, applying a color, and you're not going to have too much flexibility with that. So what we want is we want to change it to D-Log-M. This is their slightly more flat color profile. It's not as flat as true D-Log like on the Mavic 3 series. but it is a lot more flexible than a normal color profile. All right, so those are the best settings for the Air 3S, at least that I've found so far. I plan on doing another review in the future, a more in-depth review. So if you'd like to see that, go ahead and hit the like button as well as subscribe. Let me know in the comments below if I missed anything as far as settings go. Until next time, peace.